December 11th, 2021, 23-year-old Lauren Smith Fields went on a date with a man she met on a popular dating app. By the next morning, she was dead. What seemed like a typical encounter turned into a devastating tragedy. Was Lauren's death the result of a tragic accident, or was something far more troubling at play? Lauren's sudden death was initially ruled an overdose, but her family quickly discovered unsettling details about the investigation that made them question the conclusion. In this video, we will examine the case of Lauren Smith Fields, the investigation into her death, and the disturbing revelations that came to light after her family fought for answers. Lauren Smith Fields was a 23-year-old college student with a bright future ahead of her. She was studying to become a physical therapist at the University of Bridgeport, where she was dedicated to earning her degree and pursuing her dream of helping others regain their mobility and independence. Physical therapy was something Lauren was truly passionate about, believing that her work could make a real difference in people's lives. She wanted to use her skills to empower others, helping them rebuild their strength and confidence. Lauren wasn't just focused on her studies, she had a caring and compassionate nature that made her stand out. Friends and family describe her as someone who was always there for others, someone who would light up a room with her presence. Whether she was lending a hand to someone in need or volunteering at local shelters, Lauren was always eager to help those around her. Her kindness and positive energy were contagious, making everyone feel comfortable in her presence. What's the most memorable way someone's kindness has impacted you? Share your thoughts below. While Lauren was dedicated to her education and helping others, she also knew how to enjoy life, and also loved traveling. She loved dancing to her favorite music, spending time with friends, and expressing herself through her fashion. Her social media accounts were filled with happy moments, where she shared her personal style and fun outings with loved ones. Lauren had a free-spirited attitude, and anyone who knew her could sense how joyful she was. Lauren had a strong bond with her family, especially her mother, Shantell Fields, and father, Everett Smith. They supported her every step of the way, and their pride in her was evident. As the youngest child, Lauren was deeply loved and cherished by her family, and they always made sure she knew they were there for her. She was independent but knew that her family was always there to offer guidance and encouragement whenever she needed it. Have you ever had a strong support system in your life? What role does family play for you? Like many young adults today, Lauren used dating apps to meet new people. In a world where online dating has become increasingly common, Lauren was just one of many people trying to find meaningful connections in the digital world. Have you ever met someone through a dating app? What was your experience like? Feel free to share in the comments. However, Lauren's experience with online dating took an unexpected turn that night. What was supposed to be a simple night out would soon lead to a tragic and life-altering event. Do you think it's important to be cautious when meeting someone online? What precautions do you take when meeting a stranger in person? Before that night, everything seemed to be falling into place for Lauren. She was excelling in her studies, building a bright future in physical therapy, and maintaining strong relationships with her family and friends. It was hard to imagine that anything could go wrong. Her life was full of promise, yet this one encounter would take a dark turn, leading to an untimely death that would change everything. It was December 11th, 2021, a cold winter evening in Bridgeport, Connecticut. 23-year-old Lauren Smith Fields had connected with a 37-year-old man named Matthew LaFountain on the dating app Bumble. Lauren and Matthew exchanged messages on the app, and after chatting for a bit, they decided to meet in person. Matthew brought over a bottle of tequila, and the two spent the evening enjoying drinks and getting to know one another. They talked, laughed, and seemed to enjoy each other's company. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just two people connecting over a drink and conversation. Do you think meeting someone online for the first time is ever fully safe? What precautions do you take when meeting a stranger for the first time? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As the evening progressed, Lauren invited Matthew to stay the night. It seemed like a casual decision, as they had already spent several hours together. What could go wrong, right? She had been cautious about the people she met but felt comfortable in the moment, and invited him to her apartment. Have you ever invited someone over after meeting them for the first time? What made you feel comfortable doing so? The two spent more time together, but as the night unfolded, Lauren may not have realized that what seemed like a normal evening was about to take a tragic turn. By 6:30 a.m., the next morning, Matthew was jolted awake. What happened next would leave everyone who knew Lauren in shock. When Matthew woke up, he found Lauren unresponsive, blood coming from her nose. Alarmed and frightened, he called 911, his voice shaky as he told the dispatcher that something was wrong. He tried to perform CPR, following the dispatcher's instructions, but when the paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Lauren was declared dead at the scene. How would you feel in that moment? What do you think Matthew might have been thinking when he realized something was terribly wrong? Lauren's body was found in her bed, and her condition raised a number of questions. Emergency responders noted that the scene seemed calm at first glance, but Lauren had blood around her nose. Matthew, shaken, insisted that Lauren had slept off that night, only for him to find out she was no longer breathing early that morning. He said he had carried Lauren to her bed after finding her sleeping on the couch, and then he slept off beside her as well. But there was something off about his story. What do you think of LaFontaine's explanation? Do you believe he was truthful? Or does something seem off? As we reflect on the night of December 11th, 2021, we must ask, how can we prevent this from happening again? Should more precautions be in place for young women meeting people online? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And stay tuned as the search for answers continues. And if you want to stay updated on the case and other true crime stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. The moment Lauren Smith Fields' body was found on December 12th, 2021, the weight of the tragedy began to settle over her family and friends. They were still processing the shock of her sudden death when, within hours, the Bridgeport Police Department arrived to start the investigation. But what should have been a thorough examination of the circumstances surrounding her untimely death quickly became a case full of doubts and questions. Lauren's death was initially ruled an overdose and accidental overdose. The medical examiner's report pointed to a combination of fentanyl, promethazine, hydroxyzine, and alcohol in her system. It seemed like an open and shut case. But for her family, the pain of losing their daughter was only compounded by a growing sense that something wasn't right. The police's initial response was quick, but it felt rushed. Lauren's family hadn't been informed by the police about what happened to her. Instead, they found out about her death through her landlord. They were already dealing with the loss of their beloved Lauren, and to make matters worse, they felt like the police weren't treating the case with the urgency or care it deserved. Why would the police not contact the family directly? Shouldn't that be the first step when something so tragic happens? As soon as they heard the news, Lauren's family started asking questions. Why hadn't the police asked the man Lauren had spent the evening with, Matthew LaFontaine, more detailed questions? His story seemed too simple. Why was there no sense of urgency to investigate the details of the night that could explain what happened? Do you think the police should have questioned LaFontaine more thoroughly right away? Was the initial investigation too quick to assume the cause of death? Lauren's mother, Shantell Fields, was devastated. She knew her daughter. This wasn't like Lauren. It didn't feel like an accidental overdose. She was determined to find out what really happened, to uncover the truth behind her daughter's death. The lack of communication from the police, the hasty conclusions, and the inconsistency of the stories surrounding Lauren's last hours were enough to make anyone suspicious. Why weren't the authorities doing more? Though the police had quickly concluded that Lauren's death was due to a drug overdose, the Smith Fields family couldn't shake the feeling that they were being left out of the investigation. No one had even bothered to check the apartment with the thoroughness it deserved, they argued. The investigation seemed to stop too quickly. What do you think? Should the police have been more transparent with the family from the beginning? Is there a right way to approach a family when something like this happens? As more details emerged, things started to look even stranger. Matthew LaFontaine, who had spent the night with Lauren, was still a central figure in the case. His story had gaps and the details he gave didn't fully add up. When questioned by authorities, LaFountain claimed that he found Lauren sleeping on the couch, moved her to her bed, and woke up to her bleeding from the nose and not breathing. But the apartment didn't match his description of events. There were signs that suggested something had gone wrong, perhaps even something that could have been prevented. Can you imagine how Lauren's family felt, knowing there were discrepancies in LaFountain's story? What would you do if you were in their shoes, knowing the police weren't asking the right questions? Despite the many unanswered questions, the investigation proceeded slowly. Her family pushed for a more in-depth look into the circumstances surrounding Lauren's death, demanding that her case not be swept aside. They were not ready to accept that it had simply been an overdose. Was the overdose really the whole story? Or was there something more sinister hiding behind LaFountain's calm demeanor and the initial medical report? How long would you wait for answers if you were in Lauren's family's position? How much would you push the authorities to investigate further? Lauren's death wasn't just another overdose. It was a young life full of promise cut short under mysterious circumstances. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Lauren's family wouldn't stop fighting until they knew the truth. But the road to justice for Lauren was just beginning, and each day felt like another battle in their quest for answers. What do you think justice should look like in this case? How should the authorities balance the pacts they have with the families? A few days after the incident, the Smith Fields felt left in the dark by authorities. They decided to take matters into their own hands. Detective Cronin, the lead investigator in the case, had failed to show up for multiple scheduled appointments, leaving the family growing more concerned. They made repeated calls, but still no answers came. As time passed, the family began to feel neglected and dismissed, so they took an extraordinary step, deciding to go into Lauren's apartment themselves to collect her personal belongings. When they arrived, they expected to find some sense of closure, a way to piece together the life Lauren had left behind. But what they found instead was deeply troubling. As they began to gather her things, they came across several disturbing items hidden among her belongings. There, on the bed, were bloody bed sheets that spoke volumes of a night far different from what had been described in the police reports. But that wasn't all. They also found a used condom, raising even more uncomfortable questions about what had transpired between Lauren and Matthew LaFountain, the man she had spent the night with. What do you think would go through your mind if you were in the Smith family's shoes, discovering such items at a time of grief? Would you feel as though the case had been handled properly? Or would you suspect there was more to uncover? And as they continued searching, the family also found a single pill, an unexpected and alarming discovery that only fueled their growing sense that Lauren's death wasn't being fully investigated. It wasn't just an overdose, it appeared to be something more, something hidden beneath the surface. Was the pill something Lauren had taken herself, or had someone else placed it there? Who was responsible for these signs, and what did they mean? Would you have taken these findings directly to the authorities immediately, or would you have felt like you were doing the right thing by investigating further on your own? What do you think the family was feeling as they uncovered these clues? For Lauren's family, these discoveries were the tipping point. It was impossible to ignore the glaring inconsistencies between what they had found and the official narrative that had been pushed by the police. The signs in the apartment were an undeniable indication that Lauren's death had not been just another tragic, isolated accident. Something more was at play. And with these new revelations in hand, the Smith family now felt even more determined to push for answers. Do you think the family was right to take matters into their own hands, or should they have waited for the police to act? Let me know what you think about the decision to go into Lauren's apartment. The police had overlooked vital clues, and Detective Cronin's failure to respond quickly and thoroughly to the Smith family's concerns now seemed like a glaring error. How could something as significant as a bloody crime scene have been dismissed so easily? How could evidence like a used condom and an unknown pill go unnoticed in the official report? In the face of these unsettling discoveries, the Smith family knew they couldn't wait for answers any longer. Their search for the truth had only just begun, and the case was far from over. It became clear that they would need to fight harder than ever to get the justice Lauren deserved. At this point, what do you think the next step for the Smith family should be? Should they trust the system to follow through, or should they continue pressing for answers as they had been? As Shantell fought for justice, the public began to take notice. Her voice, alongside the voices of those who loved Lauren, grew louder. The case began to stir something in the community. People were outraged that a young woman's death could be so quickly dismissed. They began asking questions, too. How could the authorities be so quick to move on? How could a life so young, so full of promise, be written off so easily? Lauren's story spread across social media platforms, with hashtags like Justice for Lauren gaining traction. People were angry. They were heartbroken. They were ready to stand up and demand justice, not just for Lauren, but for every young woman whose life could be so easily forgotten. Support for Shantell and her family grew exponentially as more details about Lauren's death emerged. Do you think public pressure and social media can be a powerful tool in demanding justice? Do you think it's essential for the community to get involved when something doesn't seem right? Rapper Cardi B, using her platform, spoke out about the case, urging her millions of followers to raise awareness. This led to an even bigger wave of public support. It wasn't just the family now, it was the entire community, even people across the country, pushing for answers. Protests were organized. People gathered in large numbers, holding signs that read "Justice for Lauren" and demanding that the case be reopened with a deeper investigation. It was clear that this case wasn't going to be forgotten. It had sparked a fire. Can you imagine the relief Shantell must have felt knowing she wasn't fighting alone? What does it mean to have a community rally behind you during such a difficult time? Shantell's fight took another step when she and her family filed a lawsuit against the city of Bridgeport. They were demanding accountability for the way the police had handled the investigation. The Fields family wasn't going to back down. This lawsuit was a step toward holding the authorities responsible for mishandling Lauren's case. It wasn't just about getting answers for Lauren anymore, it was about ensuring that no one else's death would be dismissed so easily. Do you think legal action like this is necessary to push for justice? Or should the authorities be held accountable without needing a lawsuit? The case gained more media attention as Shantell and her family continued their fight. The coverage revealed inconsistencies in the investigation, raising even more questions. How could they have overlooked critical evidence, like the possibility of foul play or a deeper connection between Lauren's death and the man she had been with? Why wasn't LaFountain, who had been the last person to see her, questioned more thoroughly? What role do you think the media plays in ensuring transparency in such cases? Should the media be more involved in making sure these stories don't get buried? It was clear now. This wasn't just about a death. It was about a system that had failed Lauren, and it had failed her family. And Shantell was going to make sure the world knew that. Would you have the strength to keep fighting after facing so many obstacles? How far would you go for justice for your loved one? The fight for Lauren Smith Fields continues, and with every passing day, the Smith Fields family and their supporters gain strength. In a case that started with confusion, heartbreak, and frustration, their voices are now loud enough to be heard, and they will not stop until they get the answers Lauren deserves. As of now, the investigation is still ongoing, and the case has not yet gone to court. But the ongoing investigation is far from over. Lauren's family continues to seek answers, pressing the authorities for transparency. They hope that one day the truth will come to light and that justice will finally be served. While the case remains unresolved, it has sparked a wider conversation about the treatment of women, particularly women of color, in the criminal justice system. It's also raised important questions about online dating and the safety of women who meet strangers through these platforms. Lauren's death has become a reminder of the need for more careful scrutiny of such cases, and her family's fight for justice is a beacon for others who might feel their voices are unheard. What do you think should be the next steps in the investigation? Do you believe there should be more transparency in cases like Lauren's? The story of Lauren Smith Fields is a story that still echoes in the hearts of those who knew her, and in the minds of everyone who has heard about it. A young woman with so much promise, so many dreams ahead of her, was taken too soon. But Lauren's death is not just a sad ending, it's a reminder of the bigger issues we must confront. When Lauren was found dead in her apartment, the initial response from the authorities was swift, but it felt like they stopped too soon. They labeled it as an accidental overdose and moved on, leaving her family to question everything. Why didn't the police dig deeper? Why was this tragedy treated with so little urgency? These questions aren't just about one case, they speak to how we, as a society, fail to protect our most vulnerable, especially young women. The public outcry for Lauren wasn't just a reaction, it was a call to action. It's proof that when people come together, they can change the narrative. It's a reminder that stories like Lauren's shouldn't be forgotten. The fight for justice doesn't just belong to her family, but to everyone who stands up against injustice. But even as the search for answers continues, it's important to reflect on the legacy Lauren leaves behind. Her story is part of a larger conversation about how we treat one another and how we value each life. It calls us to stand up for what's right, to make sure everyone, especially young women, is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. So I turn to you now. What do you think happened to Lauren? Do you believe LaFountain had a role in her death? Or do you think there's more to the story than we know? How do you think we can prevent other cases like this from slipping through the cracks? Your thoughts and opinions matter, so share them with us in the comments below. If you believe in the power of justice, if you want to see cases like Lauren's treated with the seriousness they deserve, like, share, and subscribe. This story, and others like it, need to be told. Your support makes a difference, so thank you for joining us in this fight. Let's continue to seek the truth and stand up for those who can no longer speak for themselves.